Ron Howard seemed perfect for 50 years. He was the all-American boy from a TV show called Mayberry, who became a big Hollywood star. But in his newest interview, he talked about the dark secrets behind his smile. He told us about a painful choice he made in 1991 that still bothers him today. He also shared about a family member who almost died from drug addiction while Ron was winning awards. And he talked about the time on a movie set when his body completely gave out. What Ron said about those missing months will make you really sad. Ronald William Howard was born on March 1st, 1954, in Duncan, Oklahoma. From the very first moment he was born, the room was already like a movie set. His dad, Rance Howard, had started using Howard as his acting name back in 1948 before he joined the Air Force. His mom, Jean Spiegel, learned to be an actress and married Rance in 1949 in Winchester, Kentucky. When Ron was born, Rance was still wearing his military uniform and trying to balance being in the military with his dream of being in movies. But even before Ron could talk, he was already acting in movies. When he was only 18 months old, he was in his first movie called Frontier Woman. They filmed it between late 1955 and early 1956. That movie set wasn't just his first job. It was the beginning of a life where being a kid and being on camera became the same thing. While other little kids were learning to walk, Ron was learning where to stand under the bright lights. As TV shows started moving to California, the Howard family packed everything up and left Oklahoma. Rance drove the whole family straight to California, not because of the nice weather, but to be close to where movies were made. He wasn't trying to be famous. He was putting all his hopes on being near the new center of TV. Ron was just a tiny kid. But that move put him right next to the people who made shows and movies before he even started school. He was already working on a show called Playhouse 90 before he went to grade school. And by the time his little brother Clint was born on April 20th, 1959 in Burbank, their family's plan was working. They managed all their money themselves. No movie studio people, no strangers. It's just a father carefully balancing his own acting jobs while being the one person who helped his son. Rance was in more than 140 movies and 177 TV shows, not because he wanted to be famous, but to stay close to Ron's world and keep everything running smoothly. Then came October 3rd, 1960. Ron was 6 years old. That night, America met a character named Opie Taylor for the first time on The Andy Griffith Show. On paper, Ron was just another kid actor. His name in the credits said Ronnie Howard, but something different happened. On the set, something deeper was going on. Rance didn't just drop his son off at work. He argued with the writers. After reading the script early on, he told the people who made the show that the father-son scenes felt fake. Andy Griffith listened to him. They shook hands and agreed on something real. The relationship between Andy and Opie on the show would copy the real relationship between Ron and Rance. That handshake created the heart of the whole show. Over the years, Rance even acted in the show 5 times, staying nearby while Ron handled scripts and schedules that would make most grown-ups stressed out. For 8 seasons through 1968, Ron didn't just grow up. He lived his entire childhood inside a TV show shaped by love, work, and grown-up expectations wrapped up in small-town stories. Their home in Burbank wasn't some fancy celebrity house. Ron went to Robert Louis Stevenson Elementary, then David Starr Jordan Junior High, and later John Burroughs High School. The family ate meatloaf and fish sticks and saved money like actors who knew the work could end any day. Scripts were stacked near the dinner table, but Rance and Jean kept strict rules. No hired babysitters, no crazy stage parent drama. Ron played park league sports when he wasn't learning his lines. Clint joined the acting business too, quietly building a career with over 200 acting jobs. They were brothers, but also co-workers, learning early what it meant to work. Regular hours with cameras around. Ron's way of acting didn't come from being a natural child star. It came from training. Rance taught him how to listen, how to pause, how to respond like a real person, not someone showing off. When Ron got the role of Opie, it was because he didn't act like a typical kid actor. He just acted natural. Producer Sheldon Leonard noticed right away. He said Ron didn't try to be cute. He just told the truth. That's what Rance drilled into him. Be truthful, not cute. Even at 6 years old, people could see it. Ron's early pay was a few $100s per episode. But it got higher as the show became really popular. He was still losing his baby teeth when fans stopped him in Burbank asking him to sign autographs. But while his face was on TV screens everywhere, his normal childhood was quietly disappearing. One of the most memorable moments came in 1963. Season 4, Episode 1, called Opie the Birdman. 9-year-old Ron filmed a scene where Opie takes care of baby birds who lost their mother after he accidentally killed her. There were no dramatic tricks. He just stood there breathing and blinking, letting real feelings show. Director Bob Sweeney barely needed extra takes. Andy Griffith said it was grown-up level timing. Ron used a special trick. If the scene needed sadness, he thought of something that actually hurt him. Then he let it go when the camera stopped. That wasn't just talent. It was control that most kids never have. But even with all the love on set, Ron felt lonely. He called those years a golden cage. Safe, but closed in. On set, he had a tiny classroom near Stage 40 at DeSalu Studios. California law said he needed 3 hours of school and could only work 8 hours total per day. A special worker stayed nearby to make sure kids were safe, but Ron didn't have real classmates. He did math homework while workers moved camera equipment. At lunch, he sat with his dad or the prop guy. Andy would play guitar. Don Knotts told clean jokes. They tried to make it feel normal. But Ron missed playing baseball in the neighborhood and going on bike rides with friends. He didn't complain out loud, but he really felt it. In 1962, the Music Man brought a new kind of stress. He was 8 years old and got the part of Winthrop Peru in a big-budget musical movie. There was one problem. He couldn't sing on key. He couldn't dance well either. The music teacher named Ray Hindorf spent hours helping him learn the song Gary, Indiana. Ron got really scared during the tap dancing part and whispered to Shirley Jones, "I can't do it, Shirley. I can't do it." She helped him calm down. The crew filmed him only from the knees up and added tap dancing sounds later, but it worked. His shy, sweet acting helped make the movie one of the biggest hits of 1962. What no one saw was how hard he'd worked behind the scenes, between takes. Ron memorized not just his own lines, but Shirley Jones's lines too. He played with dolls and acted out complete scenes, directing tiny pretend actors through their positions and lines. To other people, it looked like just playing. To Shirley, it looked like a director in training. Rance had already started writing scripts for the Flintstones and other shows. He taught Ron how to break down a scene, how to understand why a character says every word. Those lessons didn't disappear. They stayed hidden until Ron started directing movies like Grand Theft Auto when he was just 23 years old. By 1966, Ron tried something new. He joined a show called The Monroes, a Western series filmed in the Wyoming mountains. It was rough, real land. He learned horseback riding by watching ranch workers. The location was expensive to film in. The series only lasted 26 episodes before NBC canceled it in 1967. Ron was 13 years old. For the first time, he felt rejected. The Andy Griffith Show was still going strong, but the Monroes cancellation hit him hard. He thought it was his fault. That painful feeling stayed with him. In 1968, the Brady Bunch pilot came calling. Ron was offered a chance to try out, said no. Not because he didn't want it, but because his parents said no. Rance and Gene made a rule. One of them had to be home every day between 9 a.m. and 6 p.m. if a job came in. They wanted balance. They wanted him to grow up normally. Ron wanted that too. At 14 years old, he really wanted school, space, and friends. He passed on the audition, and it might have saved his career, because by 1974, he became Richie Cunningham on Happy Days. The role that took him through his teen years and gave him the money and freedom is to start directing movies. In 1969, Ron's agent did something big. He got Ron money from the Andy Griffith Show reruns, about $50,000 a year. That was more money than Sandy Koufax earned when he was at his best playing baseball. But the Howards didn't spend it on fancy things. They kept living simply. They opened savings accounts, bought us bonds, and lived the same as always. Ron begged to invest money in a go-kart business with friends. His parents let him. He lost about $25,000. That was his first lesson about taking risks. Acting made him money, but managing money, that was a different skill. That lesson stuck with him. On April 1st, 1968, the final episode of The Andy Griffith Show aired. Ron was 14 years old. He knew the set perfectly. He knew where every light was hung and where every worker stood. That last week felt heavy. People kept their work schedules as souvenirs. Andy and Ron stayed late talking about baseball. Their goodbye on camera was quiet, but Ron felt something ending. He had lived his entire childhood 48 feet from a camera lens. Now he had to be a teenager, and within 2 years he was already balancing school with trying out for new roles. The day they took down the Mayberry sets, the next chapter had already started. In 1974, Ron Howard was just 19 years old when he walked into Gary Marshall's office and changed his whole life. He didn't read the lines like the other actors. He just sat down and ordered a cherry drink like he'd been going there every day. The connection with Henry Winkler was instant. It wasn't written in the script, but it didn't matter. For 12 minutes, Ron became Richie Cunningham, and Marshall saw it. ABC had doubts. They worried that the kid from Mayberry couldn't look like a teenager anymore. But Gary Marshall pushed back, and Ron signed a 5-year deal for $7,500 per episode. He had beaten 35 other actors, not by acting louder, but by sounding exactly like someone who'd help your grandmother carry groceries. That's what got him 255 episodes. By season 5 in 1977, Ron had been playing the same cheerful teenager for so long, it started to feel fake. He was 23 years old, playing a kid frozen in time while the real world was burning outside. Vietnam was everywhere on the news and in the papers, and it didn't make sense that Richie never noticed. So Ron wrote a 3-page letter to ABC. He asked for real topics. He suggested a story about Richie facing being drafted into the military. They said no. Too political, too risky for the companies paying for ads. So the compromise came in small moments. Richie reading newspapers about the war in the background. A quick comment about deferments. Ron felt trapped. He later told TV Guide that being a happy teenager when the world wasn't happy anymore made him feel like he couldn't breathe. That frustration planted something inside him. He didn't just want to act. He wanted control. He wanted to direct. In 1976, Fonzie was everywhere. Leather jackets were selling, posters, toys, lunchboxes, all adding up to $50 million in merchandise. ABC tried to rename the show Fonzie's Happy Days. Ron had seen this kind of thing before. His father, Rance, had fought for his name being shown properly his entire career. So Ron stood up. He was making $15,000 per episode, but he told them he'd quit. He gave them 48 hours to keep the title the way it was. If they didn't, they'd lose him. And they risked a $500,000 lawsuit for breaking his contract. Gary Marshall sided with him. The show wasn't just about Fonzie, it was about a family. ABC backed down halfway. The name stayed, but Fonzie got top billing in the credits. It was a quiet win. Then, in October 1977, Ron got his chance. He directed Season 5, Episode 5, called A Date with Fonzie. The budget was small, just $10,000. 32 scenes, 3 days. He showed up with a shot list so detailed, the crew said it was Spielberg level. One scene followed Fonzie through Arnold's Diner in a 90-second tracking shot. Normally, that would take hours. Ron nailed it in 2 takes, saving $3,000. Ratings jumped by 12%. That meant 31 million people watched. ABC gave him 2 more episodes to direct and paid him $2,500 extra per episode on top of his acting pay. Henry Winkler later said Ron made him uncomfortable in the best way. He forced real emotion instead of just catchphrases. While all this was happening, something else was growing. In 1976, Ron acted in Eat My Dust, a cheap teen crash movie from Roger Corman. But it wasn't just for fun. He had made a deal. He'd act only if Corman let him direct the next one. That movie was Grand Theft Auto, released in 1977. Ron wrote it with his dad. Rants. The budget was $602,000, but the film made $15 million. That's a 2,400% return. They destroyed 70 cars on camera, including a $40,000 Rolls-Royce, 3 Cadillacs, and 7 police cars. Ron didn't wait for permission. He filmed on real roads near Victorville. The cameras shook, the cars flipped, the chaos was real. He even used his mom, his brother Clint, and Happy Days castmate Marion Ross in the movie. The film hit theaters on June 16, 1977, and suddenly, no one was laughing at the redhead from Mayberry anymore. Ron was only 21 years old when he married Cheryl Alley on June 7, 1975. They were high school sweethearts. He proposed on a couch at his parents' house. Henry Winkler was his best man. Andy Griffith and Tom Bosley were there too. When Cheryl went into labor with their first child, Ron was on set. He dropped everything and rushed to the hospital. Years later, he said it clearly. Cheryl was the real story. She always had been. While he filmed, wrote, and directed, she was the one holding it all together in 1982. Ron took a big risk with Night Shift, a dark comedy set in a morgue. The story was wild. 2 guys running a prostitution ring out of a New York City morgue. It starred Henry Winkler and introduced Michael Keaton in his first major role. The budget was $8 million. It earned $21 million. Keaton recorded ideas into a tape recorder, danced around with a Walkman, and yelled, "Is this a great country or what?" Test audiences thought it was too raunchy. The MPAA got nervous, but it worked. Winkler got a Golden Globe nomination. Keaton exploded onto the scene. The film was bold, and it proved Ron could make studio pictures that didn't play it safe. Then came Splash. In 1984, Ron directed Tom Hanks and Daryl Hannah in a love story about a man and a mermaid. It was Disney's first touchstone release. Budget between $8 million and $11 million. It made $69.8 million. The mermaid tail weighed 35 pounds and took hours to attach. Daryl Hannah did all the underwater scenes herself. No stunt double. She swam better than the professionals. Ron and producer Brian Grazer were stunned. At first, the film had a sad ending. Madison returns to the ocean. Alan stays on land. But during test screenings, every wife in the room hated it, so they changed it. Alan dives in after her. Love wins. The critics loved it. It scored 91% on Rotten Tomatoes. It was nominated for an Oscar. Tom Hanks became a star. And for Ron, it was confirmation. He wasn't just good. He could lead the box office after Splash. Ron and Brian Grazer started a company together called Imagine Entertainment in November 1985. It was serious from the start. They merged their companies and took Imagine public the next year. TriStar Pictures signed a deal. So did Showtime and the Movie Channel. Their first projects were TV movies, theater films, and eventually shows like Sports Night. Their offices in Century City got a $4.5 million makeover in 1998. People whispered about the spending. But the numbers spoke louder. Over 43 Oscar nominations and 198 Emmys across decades. Imagine Films would make more than $15 billion worldwide. In 1995, Apollo 13 changed everything again. Ron directed it on a $52 million budget. They bought actual NASA mission control panels, some for just $1 from government surplus. They filmed 612 zero-gravity scenes aboard the Vomit Comet plane, each lasting 23 seconds. That meant 10 days of parabolic flight dives. The explosion scene with Ed Harris had to be shot 12 times. It cost $340,000. One test went wrong and burned Harris's eyebrows. Ron refused to fake it. The switch positions, the radio chatter, every blinking light had to be right. The movie made $355 million worldwide. It was nominated for 9 Academy Awards and won 2, but getting there nearly killed him. Ron worked 8-hour days for 90 straight days. He sat in on NASA briefings, watched every reel, lead night rehearsals. On day 90, he collapsed. Dehydration, high blood pressure. The set went quiet. Production stopped for 36 hours. When he returned, the crew wore shirts that said Mission Control. It wasn't just a movie anymore. It was proof. Ron had buried Opie Taylor. He didn't need to prove it again, then he made a mistake. EDTV, released in 1999, cost $80 million. It made $50 million total. Ron had turned down Castaway for it. It came out a month after The Truman Show, which told the same story but better. Critics said it felt like a warning about media while being part of the problem. It cost Imagine $30 million in losses. But Ron learned, he listened, and he moved forward. By 1999, Imagine had 23 projects in development. Universal gave them funding for 6 films per year, each with a $60 million cap. Ron didn't direct all of them, but his name was on everyone. The offices were busy. The staff had grown to 140 people. Their output in the 1990s alone had earned $2.30 billion in 2001. Ron Howard stood behind the camera directing A Beautiful Mind with a $58 million budget and something different in mind. He wanted to make the audience feel what John Nash felt. Not through crazy effects or strange filters, but through silence, through trust. He filmed Nash's hallucinations with no visual clues, no shimmering edits, no warning. The characters Charles Herman and William Parcher felt real because, to Nash, they were. And Ron wanted the viewers to discover the truth at the same time Nash did. Most scenes were shot in the order they happened in the story. 90% of the entire film unfolding just as Nash lived it. Ron returned to Princeton 3 separate times to get it right. The results were amazing. On March 24, 2002, he won the Oscar for Best Director. But the truth hiding beneath the story wasn't just Nash's. It was Ron's too. Because behind the award-winning setups and smooth edits were pieces of his own life scattered across decades of filmmaking. Regret, pressure, family, and quiet pain. A Beautiful Mind was a success, but it didn't escape criticism. Critics attacked the things left out. They noticed the missing parts of Nash's story. The affairs, the abandoned son from 1953, is the 1954 arrest that cost him his security clearance. Mathematicians called out the simplified explanation of Nash equilibrium. But none of that stopped the movie from pulling in over $313 million worldwide. It won for Oscars. Ron had proven that a story could still win hearts even when it trimmed the sharpest edges off reality. Just 5 years later, Ron was facing a very different kind of chaos. In 2006, he directed The Da Vinci Code on a $125 million budget with Tom Hanks as Robert Langdon. But the Catholic Church wasn't welcoming. Saint-Sulpice in Paris and Westminster Abbey in London both shut their doors. Ron's team had to recreate entire churches digitally, and even that didn't go smoothly. At Saint-Sulpice, the virtual coordinates were off by centimeters and nothing matched what the special effects people expected. Westminster scenes had to be filmed instead at Lincoln and Winchester cathedrals. Lincoln charged $100,000 and allowed filming from August 15th to 19th in 2005. The Louvre gave permission, only at night. No lights on the Mona Lisa, so 5 fake copies had to be made just to get the shot. The film made $758 million worldwide. The numbers looked easy. The process never was. That same year, Ron was still grieving quietly. His father, Rance Howard, had been in nearly everything. Apollo 13, Splash, A Beautiful Mind, Parenthood. But on November 25, 2017, Rance died at 89 years old in Los Angeles, just months after his wife Judy had passed away in January. He had been born Harold Engel Beckenholt in Duncan, Oklahoma on November 17, 1928. Ron called him a depression. Era farm boy who changed everything by chasing a dream. Rance had been on The Waltons, Seinfeld, Grey's Anatomy, and even earned an Emmy nomination for Through the Magic Pyramid. The man who taught Ron how to act and how to listen was gone. In 2008, Ron tackled Frost Nixon based on the 2006 play. With a $25 to $29 million budget, He captured the quiet war between David Frost and Richard Nixon. He studied old footage from the archives. He watched every twitch, every pause, every breath. When Frank Langella finally said Nixon's famous line, "I let the American people down," it hit like thunder. The film earned 5 Oscar nominations at the 81st Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director. But despite the praise, it only brought in $28.5 million. It was one of the rare Best Picture nominees that lost money. Long before all this, on June 7, 1975, Ron had married his high school sweetheart, Sherelle Alley. They were both 21 years old. They made a rule from the start: no work talk at dinner. That rule held for 50 years. Cheryl had acted too. She'd been on Happy Days. She understood the business, but she protected their home. They raised 4 kids: Bryce Dallas, twins Jocelyn and Paige, when Reed, while Ron juggled sets and studios. When Bryce was born in March 1981, Ron did something he later regretted. He directed her school play when she was 5 years old. He meant well, but it pushed her into acting before she chose it herself. Years later, he apologized. She forgave him. She studied at NYU's Tisch School and launched on her own with The Village in 2004, later earning $8 million per Jurassic World film. Ron stepped back. He didn't push the others. He had learned, but not all lessons came easily. In the 1980s, his brother Clint fell into cocaine and alcohol addiction. Clint had been a child actor too, and Hollywood didn't treat him kindly. By 1990, he was at rock bottom. Ron told him the truth: go to rehab or lose the relationship. Clint chose life. In their 2021 memoir, The Boys, they told it all. Ron admitted he felt guilty. His own rise had made Clint feel left behind. In 1991, Jocelyn was born. Just 1 year later, Ron left for 6 months to film Far and Away in Ireland. It was the longest he'd ever been away from Cheryl, from Bryce, from his newborn. When he came home, Jocelyn had changed. Bryce barely remembered him. Cheryl had been parenting alone. The moment shook him. He promised never to take long international shoots again. He kept that promise mostly, but in 2005 he broke it. Cinderella Man needed long reshoots. He missed more of Bryce's life. In 2025, during their 50th anniversary, Ron donated a bench to John Burroughs High School where they first met. He made a quiet confession. He still regretted missing so much. Cheryl nodded. The no-work dinner rule still stood, but she wished he had seen the cost earlier. In 2020, directed Hillbilly Elegy. Netflix paid $45 million for it. The film was torn apart by critics. He got a Razzie nomination for Worst Director, but Glenn Close still earned Oscar, SAG, and Golden Globe nominations. That same year, Ron released Rebuilding Paradise, a documentary on the 2018 Camp Fire that killed 85 people and destroyed 14,000 homes. His mother-in-law had lived in Paradise. The footage, the stories, it broke him. He called it the hardest project he'd ever done. He filmed for over a year. He didn't look away. Then came Eden. In 2025, Ron went in a new direction. A survival thriller set in the 1930s Galapagos Islands. He had first heard the story 15 years earlier on vacation. He started outlining the movie on his BlackBerry that same night. It starred Sydney Sweeney, Jude Law, Anna de Armas, Vanessa Kirby, Daniel B. RHL. The $55 million film opened in 664 theaters and made just $1 million. Ron called it a creative risk that left him full of anxiety. He had already been close to quitting. In 2018, Solo, a Star Wars story, collapsed around him. He'd taken over mid-shoot after the original directors were fired. He reshot 70% of the film. It still bombed. In 2025, he said publicly that Solo almost ended his directing career, but Bryce pulled him back. He returned with projects for Apple TV+. He kept going. By 2025, Ron had been married 50 years. He'd co-run Imagine Entertainment for 40 years with Brian Grazer. The company had made over 50 films, earned 47 Oscar nominations and 289 Emmy nominations. His net worth passed $200 million. He credited his dad for teaching him to stay humble. He now mentors young directors. He still tells stories. He still remembers the bench at Burroughs High, the empty seat at dinner, the baby who barely recognized him. He remembers it all.